The film begins with a group of police cars surrounding a house, and a group of officers with pistols and weapons get out of it and direct them toward the house, and the neighbors come out to watch them while they are holding one who is trying to tell them that there is something in the water, and there are large spots on the face of the criminal, and the criminal is trying to warn the people from the window of the car while it was walking, and he warns them of the water that they drink from. But people do not care about his words, and we go back in time 6 months to the beginning of the story and the events, and a little girl named Alice appears, and she's eating chicken, and her mother calls her and asks her to wash her hands and calls her sisters and tells them that food is ready, and at the same time it is her sisters Cyrus and Zakir are fighting, and their father stops them and asks them to stop playing in the mud. His clothes got dirty and he goes to break his fast. Alice stops far away watching the situation while she is sad and looks at the one who was annoyed that Alice saw him in this situation. The father sits at the dining table thanking God for the blessings that he bestowed on them, and the whole family remains gathered on the table, except for the one who arrives late to the dining table and appears on the face of sadness. As for Nissan, the father used to comment to Frances the mother about the food, telling her that the biscuits were dry and she did not accept Frances. An Arab climax, she decides to see who she is, and she finds Charlie, who is afraid of the dogs in front of the house, and keeps calling on Frances to keep the dog away from him. From their farm, she tells him that the apples are not ready and they haven't ripened in a week, and when he asks Charlie about April, she tells him that he is breaking his fast and he doesn't want to talk to him after he left him alone and he doesn't want to help him in his cell. The first, and if you don't hear his words and sell them, they will be auctioned. Frances will respond to him nervously, telling him that Nissan has confidence that she has set him up and will pass and he will not lose the farm. Frances will return to the house and interfere with Nissan, who is sitting feeling he is in debt, and Nissan asks her about that and asks her to stop pampering him so that he can get a better look. At the same time, Cyrus was behind him watching TV and mingling with him. Nissan asks Frances to adjust her clothes because there are children in the house. Frances feels embarrassed and says that she will go to see Alice and that Nissan is bothering him when Cyrus is on him. His voice is in front of the television and he asks him to turn it off completely so that he can focus on his accounts. As for Frances, she goes to check on Alice and covers her and enters on him and finds him sitting reading alone in the room, so she sits with him and tells him that Nissan told her about what happened in the morning and he complains about her that Nissan took Cyrus' class and believed him when he lied to him. He tells him that he did not bother him, so Frances tries to convince him that Nissan does not stand with Cyrus, and he is surprised that Nissan is a very strong personality in all his actions. Frances replies to him and tells him that people are different and their personalities are not the same, and that she knows that he is not like his father, but he is a good person, and she asks him not to forget that he is because of him they were able to have a house to live in after the death of his father, and after everyone in the house slept. Frances goes out and goes to the room where the assistant of Nissan lives in the farm and betrays Nissan with him, and suddenly there is a collision with a foreign body in the farm and burns the place, and everyone is terrified and they are running to see what is going on, and that is what Dr. N and his wife are doing to their neighbors and knocking on them and telling them, and the neighbors meet with the people of the house after they look at the thing that fell from space and destroyed the farm and reassure Nissan that this thing is definitely not harmful, and he advises him he continues sleeping, because it is getting late. And again in the morning, Charlie goes to Dr. Allen to talk to him. He says to him, "Because I am not empty," but Charlie asks the patient's permission and takes Allen to the side and talks to him and asks him about the thing that happened in the land of April. So he says that he's going to talk to the competent authorities and they will come to help him, but Charlie refuses exactly, and he tells him that they do not want a shower, especially since this will lose them a lot of money in their work, and until now, none of them knows whether this is harmful or normal, and propaganda will never benefit them, and he advises him to explore the matter on their own, and then talk to the authorities if they feel that something. The reality is that the one who looks like a huge ball and says that this thing was shining and lit up at night and he saw it himself from the window of his room and that the trees were moving around him despite the absence of wind at the time, but Charlie and Nissan are fighting over that and they do not believe him, and Alan returns home with Charlie after he examined the strange thing and he says that he has never seen anything like it, even after he reviewed all the academic books, and Charlie tries to guide him, and tells him that the matter is not big, and she winks at him several times now from afar, and Charlie decides that he asks permission then and leaves, and he goes out, preferring that all night watching this thing, and he finds that it is very bright and a strange liquid comes out of it. He fills the place around him, and that person approaches him and is impressed. And Alan enters the family of that person the second day in the morning, and tells them that we discover that this strange thing is not from space or anything, and that it is just a tank that fell from a plane, and they are not afraid of anything. And he feels very disappointed, as if he does not believe what was said, and then we see the farm animals drinking water, and the water is sprinkled with crops, and a person riding a car appears inside the village, and it appears to him that he is a stranger, and he gets lost and gets out of the shop. Authorities, they see Charlie from afar, and the Arabic word for authorities is written on it, so he decides to leave his office and go there quickly, and the man of the authorities enters a hotel and asks for an empty room, while Frances was going out to the farm, and you find a lot of crops that are ripe at a terrible speed. And she begins to cut it, but she finds it full of a strange liquid and its smell is terrible, and she decides to throw it quickly in the trash, as she cannot bear its smell or its shape from the inside. They are responsible for the water project that will be used in their city. They know Charlie himself. They tell him that he has been in charge of the municipality here for 3 years. A man from the authorities greets him. They tell him that his name is Will, and Charlie welcomes him. He says that if he needs anything, he is there and can help him. The city himself, so that he can choose the place where the water station project will be built, and he is trying indirectly to convince him to see the land of Neeson so that he can profit from it and from the side. Another time, the family of that person sits at lunch and fills Frances with water from the tap and puts it on the table. Alice says that the water has changed the taste of the vegetables, and Alice says that he will not drink from it. Thad and Alice do not get up from the table except when they finish their dishes and drink all the water, and Francis remains at this time, not feeling a change, neither in the food nor the water, and he is eating voraciously and gluttonously, and then Neeson goes out to the farm, and he is happy when he finds the fruit ripe and thanks God. At that time he hears the sound of his son's scream coming from afar, so he runs after him and finds the horse in an abnormal state, and they try to control it and return home, and Cyrus swears to Neeson that he did nothing for the horse to lose control and remain impulsive like this. On the other hand, Charlie asks Sophia, his secretary, to print a contract for him so that he can go with it to Neeson to convince him to sell the farm. Then she will go and send it to the chicks, and you see the feathers of the birds everywhere, and the chicks are in a state of extreme agitation, and you try to throw them food as usual, and Charlie enters Neeson and finds him collecting the crops and collecting the fruits, and once Neeson does not see Charlie, he tells him that he heard rumors that he is trying to help the government to build a project for water tanks, and this is the reason that made him go crazy and let them sell the farm. He still understands and knows, and Charlie tells him that he will regret his decision, and gives him an apple to eat, but when Charlie cuts it, he finds it full of worms from the inside, so he gets angry and fights with Charlie, and they think that he wants to name him, and throws the apple and runs, and Neeson is very surprised. And he grabs a small knife and opens the rest of the apples in his hand, and it turns out that they are really full of worms, and the whole family runs to Alice in the chick's room after they heard her voice screaming, and they find that the chicks attacked her and knocked her down, and they all try to save her, and they take her quickly to the house, and they call doctor. He calms her down and she sleeps, and he advises them to let her rest in bed for 3 or 4 days, and asks Alan Neeson about the chicks and how they got mad. One time, Neeson gets surprised and says that he doesn't know why, but for sure, isn't she the one who annoyed them? If they need something, they talk to him at length, and the whole family of that person gets in front of the TV, and Neeson says that the water from the tank of the plane spoiled his entire crop for him, and huge grains begin to appear in France's face, which keeps talking to themselves tense and fanatical, exposing themselves with needles, attacking Neeson and Cyrus, and those who try to remove them, and they take her to the room, and he runs to their neighbor. Won't they startle him quickly? And he returns home with him, and they find Neeson and Cyrus sitting in the hall, as if nothing happened, and they try to show that everything is fine, and they deny that Frances is tired, and they say that she's exhausted and went out to relax in the room, and that this is an exaggerated reaction and that we don't need a doctor, no need, and after he walks, 2 men call him about that, beat them with a pen, and say that they don't let any stranger get involved in their personal problems. One of them goes into the house because he is thirsty and can't find anyone inside, and he grabs a cup of water, and before he drinks, Frances attacks him with a knife and quickly follows him. The men quickly left the house, terrified. As for Alan, he was at the laboratory at that time, taking a water sample for analysis, and the official asked him to leave his number so that they could call him. When the result appeared, she asked Francis, whose face was filled with huge pills from that of her son, to finish eating it, but he did not want to eat it. It shows Cyrus that he also has the symptoms of pimples on his face, but Neeson shows that he is very sad, and he asks that person to take a plate of food and bring it to his sister in her bed, and he takes that plate and throws it in the bathroom. Neeson goes to the room and ties Francis to the bed in order to control her, and he keeps sitting beside her on a chair, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and gets dressed and gets comfortable, but he suddenly finds his mother in front of him, who turns into a monster, attacking him, Hanisen, who is trying to control him and he can't, and he takes her and takes her outside. And Alice prefers to cry while she is sitting on the stairs, and Cersei asks him to kill her, take her Neeson, and put her in his room in the farm and lock her inside her, but Alice enters that room in his room while she is crying, and that one takes her in his lap, and the second day in the morning he goes to that room in which his mother is and he finds her turning into a monster and trying to hurt him, and he runs quickly and locks the door behind him and goes to Dr. Allen's house and doesn't find him, and asks for that many times. Because there are many things that are not understood in the sample, but the most important point is that he must know that the source of this water is dangerous and he must keep away from it because it is very harmful and he does not use it. Alan runs quickly after he hears their words and tries to reach Charlie, but an employee in his office says that he went out and at that time he still reached Murat Allen, and she tells him that he called her and told him about the result of a water sample and things that she does not understand, and Charlie tells her that he will need her help so that they can convince her husband to hide the water issue. And Neeson also sells the land in order to succeed in their deal and get a commission, and Alan calls Charlie's office every once in a while, but he can't reach him. Sophie the secretary tells him that he has gone to Neeson's farm. At that time, Charlie remains standing in front of Neeson's house. The dogs attack Alan's times, and Charlie runs to hide in the room where Francis is, and finds it dark and lights a match, but Francis attacks him from one side.